I never thought I'd be the guy writing a post like this. You always assume this kind of thing happens to other people. Naive men who don't pay attention, clueless husbands who ignore the signs. But here I am, feeling like the biggest fool on the planet. My wife, Rachel, and I have been together for almost 10 years, married for 6. We weren't perfect, but I always thought we were solid, a team that could weather anything. We had inside jokes, lazy Sunday mornings, shared ambitions, and dreams we built together. I wasn't some oblivious, checked-out husband. I paid attention, or at least I thought I did. Turns out, I was wrong. Over the last few months, little things had started to shift between us, but I convinced myself they were just normal phases every couple goes through. She became more glued to her phone, which wasn't unusual in itself, but the way she treated it was. Before, she'd leave it lying around, answering texts in front of me, even letting me use it if mine was dead. Now, she clutched it like it held national secrets, angling the screen away, locking it the second I got near. At night, she'd stay up scrolling, fingers flying over the screen, lips curling into small smiles at whatever she was reading. I'd ask her what was so funny, and she'd just brush me off with some vague excuse about a stupid meme or work group chat. But it wasn't just the phone. Other things started to change too. She suddenly needed to run errands late at night, multiple times a week. It started with small things, forgetting milk, needing shampoo, realizing we were out of coffee. But then it became ridiculous. No one needs emergency paper towels at 1 a.m., yet she insisted she did. Every time, she'd act irritated if I offered to go with her or suggested we just wait until morning. "I just need some air," she'd say with that exasperated sigh, like I was suffocating her by caring. At first, I figured maybe she just wanted space. Marriage is a lot, and I get that people need time to themselves. But why was she suddenly getting all her alone time at odd hours of the night? And why did she come back smelling different? Not bad, not like sweat or exhaustion, but like perfume mixed with something else, something I couldn't quite place. When I'd casually ask how her trip was, she'd give these short, almost rehearsed answers. Nothing exciting, just grabbed what I needed and came back. But if that was true, why did she always take so long? Then there was the intimacy, or rather, the lack of it. We used to be affectionate, always stealing touches, curling up together on the couch, reaching for each other in the middle of the night. But over the last few months, she pulled away. If I tried to get close, she'd sigh, complain about being tired, claim she had a headache, stress from work, anything to put distance between us. I told myself it was just a rough patch, that maybe she was feeling off, but in the back of my mind, a tiny voice whispered something I wasn't ready to hear. I buried that thought deep down, refusing to acknowledge what it might mean. Then last weekend happened, and everything cracked wide open. Rachel told me she was going out for a girls' night with her best friend, Lauren. It wasn't unusual. She'd gone out with Lauren plenty of times before, but something about the way she said it put me on edge. Maybe it was how overly casual she sounded, or maybe it was how she got ready, spending extra time in front of the mirror, curling her hair, picking out an outfit that made her look like she was going clubbing, not just grabbing drinks with a friend. She even put on perfume, the expensive one she usually saved for special occasions. I remember thinking she looked amazing, but something felt off. I couldn't shake the feeling that she was trying too hard, like she wasn't just going out to have fun, but to impress someone. She left around 8 p.m., promising she wouldn't be too late. The second the door closed behind her, that uneasy feeling in my gut intensified. I don't know what possessed me to do it, but about an hour later, I pulled out my phone and shot Lauren a text, something casual. "Hey, hope you two are having a blast tonight." Her response came quickly, and it was the moment everything changed. "What are you talking about?" "I'm at home, watching Netflix." My stomach dropped. I stared at my phone, willing the words to change, to mean something else, but they didn't. She wasn't with Lauren. She'd lied, straight to my face, without even hesitating. I didn't know what to do. Part of me wanted to call her right then and there, demand to know where she was, but I held back. If she was lying this easily, she'd have an excuse ready, some smooth lie to cover it up. No, I needed proof. I needed something undeniable. So I waited. The hours crawled by. She finally came home at 1 a.m., stumbling through the door like nothing was wrong, reeking of alcohol and, God help me, cologne. A man's cologne. My heart pounded, my mind screaming at me to say something, to call her out, but I kept my face neutral. "How was your night?" I asked, forcing my voice to sound light. She flopped onto the couch, kicking off her heels, stretching like she'd just run a marathon. Oh my God, babe, we had so much fun. Lauren and I bar hopped all night. You should have seen us. We were such a mess. I just watched her. She looked me dead in the eye and lied, without so much as a flicker of hesitation. But I caught something, a tiny pause, a fleeting flicker of something in her expression when I asked, "You sure Lauren was there?" It lasted only a second before she plastered on a smile and rolled her eyes. Of course, she was there. Why are you acting so weird? I shrugged, forcing myself to act like I wasn't unraveling inside. No reason. I let it go for the moment. Pushing wouldn't get me the truth, not from her. I needed proof, something she couldn't talk her way out of. And, as it turned out, that proof came faster than I expected. Because the next morning, my neighbor Jim stopped by. Jim is this retired guy who lives 2 houses down, always rambling about his grandkids or complaining about the raccoons getting into our trash. But this time, he wasn't smiling. He looked hesitant, uncomfortable, like he wasn't sure if he should even be talking to me. Then he handed me a USB drive. You might want to see this, he said slowly. I have a security cam in my backyard, points toward the alley behind the grocery store. Last night, I caught something you might want to know about. I took the drive, my hands suddenly ice cold. I had no idea what was on that footage, but deep down, I knew it wasn't going to be good. And I was right. I sat there, staring at the USB drive in my hand, feeling like my entire world was balanced on the edge of a knife. Jim didn't say much more, just patted my shoulder in that awkward, hesitant way older men do when they're delivering bad news and don't quite know how to soften the blow. He muttered something about how he wasn't trying to get in anyone's business, but he thought I deserved to know, and then he left, disappearing down the driveway like he couldn't get away fast enough. I stood frozen in the doorway, watching him go, my thoughts spinning out of control. I didn't want to believe it. Maybe it was a misunderstanding. Maybe Jim had gotten the wrong idea. Maybe, God, I was grasping at straws, desperate to convince myself that I wasn't about to see what I knew I was about to see. But there was no backing out now. With my hands shaking, I went inside, plugged the USB into my laptop, and opened the video file. The footage wasn't high quality, grainy, black and white, the kind of security footage that only just barely captured what it needed to. But it didn't need to be crystal clear for me to recognize my own wife. The timestamp showed it was just after midnight, and there she was, walking into frame, her long hair unmistakable even in the poor lighting. She wasn't alone. A man was with her. Tall, broad-shouldered, someone I didn't recognize. He was leading her toward the alley behind the grocery store, the dim glow from the streetlights casting long shadows over them. Rachel glanced around, looking over her shoulder like she was checking to see if anyone was watching. Then she grabbed his hand and pulled him further into the darkness. My chest tightened, my heart hammering against my ribs so hard I thought I might be sick. I didn't want to keep watching, but I couldn't look away. They stopped behind a stack of wooden pallets, half hidden from the camera but not enough to obscure what was happening. The guy backed her up against the wall, pressing close, his hands roaming over her like he owned her. And she let him. Worse, she welcomed it. She tilted her head back, laughing at something he said, her hands gripping his shoulders, her fingers curling into his jacket. It wasn't just some random kiss. It wasn't a stupid drunken mistake. It was familiar, practiced, like this wasn't the first time. The way she touched him, the way she melted against him, this wasn't a one-time thing. This was something that had been happening for a while. I felt like my lungs had collapsed, like I was drowning in air that was suddenly too thick to breathe. My hands clenched into fists as I watched them disappear even further into the shadows, the footage unable to capture the rest of what I knew had happened next. I slammed the laptop shut so hard the screen nearly cracked. For a few minutes, I just sat there in absolute silence, my mind a complete void. Then, all at once, everything hit me like a freight train. The late-night errands, the distant behavior, the way she had come home reeking of someone else, the lies she had told so effortlessly. It had all been leading to this moment, and I had been too blind, too trusting, too stupid to see it. I felt hot, like a fire had been lit under my skin, rage and humiliation warring inside me, neither willing to give the other space to breathe. My wife, the woman I had built a life with, the person I had trusted above all else, was sneaking off into dark alleys in the middle of the night with another man. I had loved her. I had defended her, even against my own gut instincts. And this was what she had been doing behind my back. I don't even remember standing up, but the next thing I knew, I was pacing the living room, my mind racing with what to do next. I couldn't just sit here. I had to confront her. I had to see her face when she realized she had been caught. My hands were shaking so badly, I had to take a few deep breaths to steady myself before I grabbed my phone and checked her location. She hadn't turned it off this time. She was at work. Perfect. I grabbed my keys and drove over, every mile feeling like an eternity. By the time I got there, I was running purely on adrenaline. Rachel worked at a small marketing firm, and her office was in a sleek, modern building downtown. I didn't care that it was the middle of the workday. I marched straight through the lobby, past the receptionist who barely had time to ask if I needed help, and took the elevator up to the 4th floor. When I stepped out, I spotted her immediately. She was at her desk, typing away, completely unaware that her world was about to come crashing down. I didn't bother lowering my voice when I spoke. "Rachel." She turned, blinking in surprise when she saw me. Then, just as quickly, her expression shifted into something wary, like she could already tell something was wrong. "Hey, what are you doing here?" she asked, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Is everything okay?" I pulled my phone out, opened the video, and placed it on her desk. "Why don't you tell me?" Her face drained of color so fast, it was almost impressive. Her fingers twitched, like she wanted to snatch the phone away, but she knew it was too late. I watched her scramble, her brain working overtime to come up with an explanation, a lie, something that would get her out of this. For the first time in our marriage, she had no quick excuse, no glib dismissal to wave away my suspicions. I saw the exact moment she realized she was caught. "Where did you get that?" she asked, her voice quieter now, almost cautious. My blood boiled. That was what she led with. Not an apology, not a denial, not even an attempt to explain. Just "where did you get that?" Like the problem wasn't what she did, but the fact that I had proof. "It doesn't matter where I got it," I snapped. "I know what you've been doing. I know. So don't even try to lie to me again." Rachel's mouth opened, then shut. Her eyes darted around, probably checking to see if anyone was listening. I didn't care. Let them hear. Let the whole damn office hear. "Look," she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I was drunk, okay? It didn't mean anything. It was stupid. I don't even like him. It was just." I laughed, a bitter, humorless sound. "Drunk? That's the best you've got? You've been running off in the middle of the night for months, Rachel. This wasn't a mistake. This was a choice. Over and over again." Her jaw tightened, something in her expression shifting from panic to defensiveness. "You're overreacting." That was it. That was the moment I knew there was no coming back from this. No apology would have fixed it, but at least it would have meant something. But this was just contempt. I leaned in, lowering my voice just enough so that only she could hear. "Pack your things when you get home. I want you out of the house by tomorrow." Her eyes widened. "Wait, let's just talk." "There's nothing left to talk about." I cut in. "You threw this away. Now you get to live with the consequences." I turned and walked away, leaving her sitting there, stunned and speechless. She had lied to me for months, but now, finally, she had nothing left to say. I drove home in silence, gripping the wheel so hard my knuckles turned white, my mind a tangled mess of emotions that I couldn't even begin to unravel. I thought I would feel some sense of relief after confronting Rachel, like ripping off a Band-Aid and finally letting the wound breathe. But instead, I just felt hollow, angry, betrayed. More than anything, I felt stupid. How could I have let this happen? How could I have been so blind? The signs had been there all along, flashing like neon lights, and I had ignored every single one of them because I had wanted to believe in her, in us. And now, all that was left was the ugly truth staring me in the face. She had looked me in the eye and lied, over and over, without hesitation. She had made me feel paranoid, like I was the one with the problem, while she was sneaking off into dark alleys with another man. And when she finally got caught, she hadn't even had the decency to apologize, just pathetic excuses, defensive bullshit, and, worst of all, that dismissive little "you're overreacting." That was the moment it really hit me, how little she respected me, how little she cared about what she had done to our marriage. By the time I pulled into the driveway, the initial shock of everything had started to wear off, leaving behind something colder, sharper, more deliberate. I wasn't going to let her turn this around on me. I wasn't going to let her make me feel like the crazy one anymore. She had made her choice, and I had made mine. She was going to leave. I stepped into the house, every room suddenly feeling foreign, like I was standing in someone else's life, not my own. Our framed wedding photos still hung on the walls, our initials carved into that stupid wooden plaque she had insisted on getting from some overpriced Etsy shop. The couch where we had spent countless nights curled up watching movies, the kitchen where we had made dinner together, laughing and sneaking bites of food before it was ready, it all felt like a sick joke now. Like everything had been leading up to this moment, where I finally realized that none of it had meant as much to her as it had to me. I grabbed a duffel bag from the closet and started tossing in some of her clothes, her toiletries, whatever I could fit. She could come back for the rest later, but I wanted her gone. The thought of sleeping in the same bed as her, even for one more night, made my skin crawl. I didn't care where she went, her sister's, a hotel, that asshole's place for all I cared, but she wasn't staying here. I had just sipped up the bag when I heard the front door open. I turned to see her standing there, her face a mask of forced calm, like she was trying to act as if this was just some minor argument that we could work through. "We need to talk," she said, her voice softer now, almost coaxing, as if she still thought she could manipulate me into letting this go. "There's nothing left to talk about," I said, my voice flat, emotionless. I gestured toward the duffel bag on the floor. "Take your stuff and go." Her eyes flickered to the bag, and for a moment, real panic flashed across her face. She hadn't actually thought I would go through with it. She had thought I would yell, maybe sleep on the couch for a night or two, but then calm down and let her keep playing whatever sick game she had been playing. But I wasn't giving her that option. "Come on," she tried again, stepping toward me, her tone shifting into something almost condescending. "You're being dramatic. We should sit down, actually talk about this like adults." I laughed, but it was cold, hollow. "Like adults? You mean the way you snuck around behind my back and lied to my face over and over again? That kind of adult conversation?" I shook my head, clenching my jaw so tightly I thought my teeth might crack. "You don't get to decide how I react to this, Rachel. You made your choices. Now you get to deal with the consequences." Her expression hardened, and just like that, the mask slipped. "You're really going to throw away 6 years of marriage over one mistake?" I stared at her, stunned at the sheer audacity of the words coming out of her mouth. One mistake? One? Did she really believe that? Or was she just so deep in her own lies that she had started to believe them herself? I took a slow breath, forcing myself to stay calm because if I let myself explode, I knew she would just twist it into something else, make me the bad guy somehow. "This wasn't one mistake," I said, my voice low but steady. "This was months of lying, sneaking around, covering your tracks. This was repeated choices, over and over again, to betray me. And the worst part? You didn't even care enough to come up with a decent excuse. You didn't even try to make me believe you were sorry." She folded her arms over her chest, her jaw tightening. "So that's it? You're just giving up?" I exhaled sharply, shaking my head in disbelief. "I wasn't the one who gave up, Rachel. That was you, the second you decided that some random guy in an alley was worth more than our marriage." She opened her mouth like she was going to argue, but I didn't give her the chance. I picked up the duffel bag and shoved it into her hands, then stepped back, making it clear that this conversation was over. For a moment, I thought she might actually cry. Maybe she wanted to. Maybe she thought a few tears would fix this, that I would soften, that I would cave. But I didn't. I just stood there, waiting, until finally, she let out a sharp breath and turned on her heel, storming toward the door. She hesitated for half a second before looking back at me. "You're making a mistake," she said, her voice colder now, no longer pretending to be remorseful. I didn't even blink. "No, Rachel, you did." And with that, she walked out the door, slamming it behind her. The second she was gone, the house felt different. Empty, yes, but also lighter, like something rotten had finally been cut out. I knew the worst wasn't over yet. There would be legal stuff to deal with, loose ends to tie up, people to tell. But for the first time in months, I felt like I could actually breathe. The moment the door slammed behind her, the silence that followed was almost deafening. I stood there for a long time, just staring at the empty space where she had been, my mind struggling to process what had just happened. It felt surreal, like I had been living inside someone else's life for the past few hours, and now, finally, I was waking up. Except this wasn't a nightmare I could shake off. This was real. The woman I had loved, trusted, and built a life with had walked out, not because she was heartbroken over what she had done, but because she was angry that I had found out. That was what stuck with me the most. Not once had she truly looked sorry. There had been no genuine remorse, no real attempt to fix things. Just deflection, excuses, and an overwhelming sense of entitlement, like I was the one being unreasonable for expecting basic loyalty from my own wife. I exhaled slowly, rubbing a hand over my face, feeling the weight of exhaustion settle over me. My body felt like it had been through a war, my chest tight, my head pounding, my hands still trembling from the sheer force of keeping myself from exploding during that conversation. Every inch of me screamed for sleep, for some kind of relief, but I knew there was no escaping this. Not yet. I moved on autopilot, grabbing a trash bag and walking straight into our bedroom. No, my bedroom now. Her scent was everywhere, in the pillows, in the closet, in the stupid vanilla-scented candles she had insisted on keeping by the nightstand. I yanked open the drawers, pulling out anything of hers I could find and shoving it into the bag with no particular order or care. Shirts, pajamas, hair ties, that overpriced skincare crap she had stocked the bathroom with, it all went in. Every time I came across something of hers, a fresh wave of anger surged through me. How many nights had she come home to this room, to this bed, after sneaking around like a goddamn teenager? How many times had she kissed me with the same mouth that had just been on someone else? My stomach twisted at the thought, while rising in my throat. I hated this. I hated her. But more than that, I hated myself for letting it get this far. I threw the last of her things into the bag and dragged it to the front door, setting it down beside her duffel. She could come pick it up when she wanted. I didn't care. I wasn't going to waste another second of my life dealing with her bullshit. But even as I tried to move forward, tried to tell myself that this was good, that I was getting rid of the poison in my life, a deep, gnawing ache settled into my chest. Because the truth was, for all her lies, for all her betrayals, I hadn't wanted this. I had wanted the life I thought we had, the woman I thought she was. I had wanted the nights spent laughing over takeout, the lazy mornings wrapped up in each other, the shared dreams of growing old together. But none of that had been real, not really. I had been holding on to a version of her that didn't exist anymore, maybe never had. And now, all I had left were the pieces of something that had already been broken long before I had even realized it. I didn't sleep that night. I tried, but every time I closed my eyes, my mind replayed everything, the footage, her lies, the way she had looked at me when I confronted her, the way she had not looked at me like a wife devastated by her own mistakes. By the time the sun started creeping through the blinds, I had made up my mind. I wasn't going to sit around and let this drag out. I wasn't going to let her weasel her way back in with half-hearted apologies or manipulative games. I needed to move forward, and that started with making things official. I spent the morning researching divorce lawyers, sifting through reviews and recommendations, making calls until I found one who could meet with me the next day. The thought of dealing with all the legal aspects of this mess made my head throb, but there was no avoiding it. The sooner I started the process, the sooner I could put this chapter of my life behind me. The next few days passed in a blur of logistics and uncomfortable conversations. I had to tell my family, my friends, explain why Rachel was suddenly gone without warning. Every time I said the words out loud, she cheated. We're done. It felt like I was hammering another nail into the coffin of our marriage, solidifying the fact that there was no coming back from this. Some people were shocked, others not so much. My mom cried. My best friend swore he had never liked her anyway, which, honestly, I doubted, but I appreciated the loyalty. Rachel, on the other hand, wasted no time rewriting the narrative. Within a day, mutual friends started reaching out, awkwardly tiptoeing around the subject, clearly having heard her side first. Apparently, I had been the one who gave up too easily. I had overreacted. She had even hinted that I had trust issues, and that I had been paranoid for months, which, of course, had pushed her away. The sheer audacity of it made me want to laugh and punch a hole in the wall at the same time. Classic cheater move, get caught, then try to paint the other person as the problem. I ignored it. Let her spin whatever version of the truth she needed to make herself feel better. At the end of the day, I had the proof. I knew what really happened, and that was enough for me. The only time she reached out directly was a pathetic, half-assed attempt at salvaging something, though I wasn't sure if it was her pride or her reputation she was more concerned about. She texted me, "I still think we should talk. I know you're hurt, but we shouldn't throw everything away over one mistake." I didn't even respond. What was there to say? The woman who had thrown away 6 years of marriage in the back alley of a grocery store was now asking me not to throw everything away. The irony was almost comical. Almost. By the end of the week, I felt lighter. Not better, not yet, but lighter, like I could finally start breathing again without the weight of her lies pressing down on me. The house still felt strange, too big and too empty, but I was slowly reclaiming it as mine. I changed the sheets, threw out her candles, moved things around just to erase the way she had arranged them. Small steps, But each one made me feel a little more in control. A little more like I was moving forward. I wasn't naive enough to think the hard part was over. There would still be moments of anger, sadness, regret. There would still be nights when the memories would creep in, when I would wonder how things had gone so wrong. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was walking towards something instead of just drowning in what I had lost. I didn't know what was next, but I knew one thing for sure. I was done wasting my time on someone who never deserved me in the first place. The first few weeks after Rachel left were strange in a way I hadn't anticipated. I expected the sadness, the anger, the occasional burst of resentment that hit me at random moments, but what I hadn't expected was the sheer emptiness that came with it. The silence in the house was deafening, an absence so loud it practically echoed. I had always thought of myself as someone who valued his space, who enjoyed the quiet, but now, without the background noise of another person's presence, the sound of her moving around in the kitchen, the hum of her voice on a phone call, the soft creak of the floorboards as she walked through the house, I felt like I was living inside a hollowed-out version of my own life. At first, I hated it. Every corner of the house reminded me of her, of the life we had built, and I found myself avoiding certain rooms just to keep from triggering another spiral of unwanted memories. But slowly, almost imperceptibly, that feeling began to change. The silence started feeling less oppressive, less like a constant reminder of what I had lost, and more like an open space where something new could begin. I threw myself into anything that would keep me busy. Work became my refuge, and I took on extra projects, longer hours, anything to keep my mind occupied. I started going to the gym more, not out of some dramatic need for a post-breakup glow-up, but because it gave me a physical outlet for the frustration still simmering inside me. I reconnected with friends I had unintentionally drifted from over the years, the ones Rachel had subtly pushed out of my life with her little comments about how she never really clicked with them, or how she felt left out when I hung out with them. Funny how I had let so much of my life shrink around her without even realizing it. Now, with her gone, I felt like I was slowly stretching back into myself, reclaiming the parts of me that had been dulled down over the years. The divorce process, while emotionally exhausting, was mercifully straightforward. She didn't fight it much, maybe because she knew she had no leg to stand on, or maybe because she had already mentally moved on long before I even caught her. Either way, within a few months, everything was signed, settled, done. No drawn-out battles, no dramatic courtroom showdowns, just 2 signatures on a stack of papers that officially erased 6 years of marriage. When I left the lawyer's office that day, I expected to feel something overwhelming, relief, sadness, maybe even regret. But instead, all I felt was nothing. Just a strange kind of weightlessness, like I had been carrying something heavy for so long that I had forgotten what it was like to walk without it. Rachel tried to reach out one last time, sending a short, almost clinical message. I hope one day we can be friends. I didn't mean to hurt you. I stared at it for a long time, debating whether to respond, whether I should say something scathing or just ignore it entirely. In the end, I simply deleted it without replying. There was nothing left to say. She hadn't meant to hurt me? What a joke. She had chosen to hurt me, again and again, every single time she made the decision to sneak around, to lie, to betray me. And now, months later, she wanted to rewrite history, to soften the edges of what she had done so she could sleep easier at night. Well, she could deal with her own conscience. I was done carrying the weight of her choices. And so, life moved forward. The moments of anger became fewer and farther between. The nights spent replaying everything in my head grew less frequent. The pain didn't vanish overnight, but it dulled, fading into something manageable, something I could live with. I started dating again, not with any desperate need to replace her, but just to remind myself that there was still life after all of this. That I wasn't some broken, discarded thing just because one person had treated me like I was disposable. It was strange at first, stepping back into the world of first dates and awkward small talk, but eventually it felt normal. Good, even. Not every date was a success, and I wasn't in a rush to dive headfirst into another relationship, but each time I sat across from someone new, I felt a little more like myself again. Looking back, I realized that the worst part of it all wasn't losing Rachel, it was losing the idea of what I thought we had. The version of our marriage that had existed in my head had been a lie for a long time, maybe even longer than I wanted to admit. The woman I had loved wasn't real, not in the way I had believed. Rachel had been a version of herself that she let me see, the one she knew would keep me wrapped around her finger while she did whatever the hell she wanted behind my back. That was the hardest pill to swallow. Not the betrayal itself, but the understanding that I had been loving someone who didn't truly exist. But I had learned from it. I had learned to trust my gut, to never again ignore that nagging feeling that something wasn't right. I had learned that love wasn't supposed to be built on blind faith, that a relationship without trust was nothing more than a house with rotting foundations. And most importantly, I had learned that I was stronger than I ever gave myself credit for. Rachel had shattered my trust, but she hadn't shattered me. So if there's one thing I can say to anyone who's going through something similar, it's this: you will be okay. It won't feel like it at first. It will hurt in ways you never imagined, and some days, it will feel like the weight of it will crush you. But one day, you'll wake up, and the first thing on your mind won't be them. You'll laugh again without it feeling forced. You'll start making plans for the future without thinking about how they fit into it. And slowly, bit by bit, you'll rebuild. And when you do, you'll realize that losing someone who didn't truly love you isn't really a loss at all. It's a gift. A second chance to build the life you actually deserve. And that's exactly what I'm doing now. Months passed, and life took on a new shape, one that, for the first time in a long time, felt like mine. The weight of Rachel's betrayal had faded into the background, no longer the constant storm cloud hovering over my every thought. It wasn't that I had completely forgotten or that the memories didn't sting when they surfaced unexpectedly, but they no longer had the power to define my days. The anger had burned itself out, leaving behind something clearer, steadier, a quiet understanding that what had happened wasn't a reflection of my worth but of hers. That realization was the real turning point. I had spent so much time wondering what I could have done differently, what I had missed, if I had somehow been less attentive, less exciting, less something that had driven her to make those choices. But the truth was, her actions had nothing to do with me. They were her failures, her selfishness, her inability to value what she had. Once I truly accepted that, it was like I had finally stepped out of the wreckage and into the sunlight. I made changes, not just in my routine, but in the way I approached life. I stopped seeing my home as a graveyard of what had been and started making it my own again. I repainted rooms, bought new furniture, got rid of anything that still carried a trace of her. It was cathartic, turning something that had once felt like ours into something that was mine alone. And as stupid as it might sound, the simple act of rearranging my space did something to me internally too. It was a reminder that I had control over my own life, that I wasn't stuck in the ruins of what she had destroyed, that I had the power to rebuild something even better. And then there was dating. At first, it had been more of an experiment than anything else, a way to test the waters, to see if I was even capable of connecting with someone again after everything. The first few dates were awkward, not because the women were bad company, but because I was still figuring out how to be just me again, not the version of myself I had been within a failing marriage. But with time, it got easier. I started to enjoy the process, the anticipation of getting to know someone new, the excitement of realizing that I still had so much ahead of me. There was no rush to find something serious. I wasn't looking to fill the void Rachel had left, because, truthfully, that void had already closed. I wasn't seeking someone to fix me, because I had already done that myself. I was just open to whatever came next, whether it was a fleeting connection or something more lasting. And then I met her. It wasn't some grand, cinematic moment, no dramatic meet-cute, no instant fireworks. It was just a simple conversation at a coffee shop, a random encounter that turned into something more. Her name was Emily, and she was different from Rachel in every way that mattered. Where Rachel had been quick with shallow charm, Emily was effortlessly warm, the kind of person who made you feel comfortable just by being around her. Our first date was easy, natural, like talking to someone I had known for years instead of hours. There was no game playing, no guarded deflections, just two people genuinely enjoying each other's company. I was cautious at first, hesitant to let myself fall too quickly. I had learned my lesson about blind trust, about rushing into something without truly seeing the other person for who they were. But Emily never gave me a reason to doubt her. She was honest, straightforward, and, most importantly, she valued the very things Rachel had thrown away. She wasn't just interested in being with someone. She was interested in building something real, something grounded in mutual respect and trust. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was with someone who saw me, not just as a placeholder in their life, but as a person who mattered. It wasn't about replacing Rachel. It wasn't even about proving to myself that I could love again. It was just about finally being in a place where I could appreciate what a healthy, real relationship felt like. And as the weeks turned into months, something became clear. What had happened with Rachel wasn't just an ending. It was a beginning. A hard, painful, gut-wrenching beginning, but a beginning nonetheless. It had forced me to grow, to reevaluate what I wanted, to reclaim the parts of myself I had lost in a marriage that had been doomed long before I realized it. It had given me the freedom to start over, not just with someone else, but with myself. Looking back, I don't regret the years I spent with Rachel. I regret her, sure. I regret the lies, the betrayal, the way she made me question my own reality. But I don't regret the lessons I took from it. I don't regret the strength I found in the aftermath. I don't regret the way it shaped me into someone who now knows what he wants, what he deserves, and what he will never again tolerate. Because the truth is, sometimes the worst thing that ever happens to you is also the best thing that ever happens to you. If Rachel hadn't done what she did, if she hadn't shattered everything, I might have spent years, decades, trapped in something that was slowly suffocating me. I might have continued living in a lie, never knowing that something better was waiting for me on the other side. And now, standing where I am today, I can honestly say that I'm grateful. Not for her, never for her, but for the chance to start again, to build something new, to finally, truly be happy. Because for the first time in a long, long time, I am.